Hey everybody, my name is Danielle and this is Chatter Out Loud. Thank you so much for joining me. Your presence is very much appreciated. So welcome or welcome back. Today I'm back to chat about Reasonable Doubt on Hulu. This episode wasn't so good to me. I have to be honest. The novelty is wearing off, I guess. Part of what they've shown in this new episode was necessary to understand more about Jax's origin story. So I get the reason for the episode. I just thought it lacked something, But most of it, I don't know. Most of it could have been redone or left out, I guess. And that's too bad. I'm going to chat a little bit about this episode 5. I think it was called So Ambitious. So if you're interested, keep listening. Okay, as I mentioned, this episode shares a little bit more about Jax. It's 16 years earlier. She's a younger Jax with a lot of ambition. We see her as a public defender and learn about how she and Damon met. She defended him. I think the idea of this episode, like I alluded to earlier, was to see how they arrived at certain things in present day, right? So we learn a little bit more about Jax being in the public defender's office. We learn about Damon's crime. We learn about some of her relationships with her friend, how she met Lewis. So I get what they were doing. So let me start with an example. When we learn about Damon and more about why he was arrested and what happened, we see through that. When Jax is defending him, right? We see how the story evolved. We see Jax's relationship with the DA, right? Remember, it was 16 years ago, and the DA was interested in Jax way back when, but she wasn't. But more or less, we learn that Damon was either framed or his co-defendant rolled over on him or something to that effect. But we see a little bit of that story, right? We learn about Paul in the last episode. In the last episode, I called him Peter. I don't know where Peter came from, but anyway, Paul is his name, and this is Jax's mother's new husband. There's a hint that he did do something to Jax during a bender or under the influence. He's an addict of some sort, and we watch as he apologizes to Jax, right? But this doesn't go over well with Jax because she's angry that her mother took Paul back after everything that happened to Jax by Paul, right? So they don't tell us what happened yet, but I can only imagine. So we get the origin of that, where that came from, right? Because remember in the the episode before last, I had mentioned that Jax tenses up when she sees Paul. So there's something to that story there. The scene between Damon and Jax when he called from his burner phone from jail, this was a little cringe to me. Honestly, I thought that it added very little to the story overall. I mean, maybe the writers wanted to set the stage of how much they were attracted to one another, but I don't think they got it right. I think it was all wrong with that scene. It served no purpose. It was cringe to me. I don't know. I didn't like that scene when he called her from the burner phone. That's all I can say. Damon on the stand losing his temper. I thought that was awful too. I like Michael Ealy, but it just was, I still don't believe he killed that person. And the fact that he lost his temper and used a curse word or something, it just, I don't know. It didn't seem, it wasn't, what am I trying to say here? It wasn't delivered like I thought. So as a viewer, I'm not buying into this whole, losing his temper on the stand. I just didn't buy it. I guess that's, in short, I just didn't buy it, right? We also saw Chanel talk about meeting JT, right? Remember in the last episode, I shared that Chanel and JT were having their own marital problems, right? He stepped out on her and she was living with someone on a futon as a result, right? So she left her husband. Anyway, we see in this episode 5, Chanel talk about when she first met JT and how he stood her up at the wedding, and he was supposed to be her +1 for the wedding they were going to in this episode. That there should have been a clue or first clue of his character, but we know that it was ignored because she wound up marrying him anyway, and now they're separated in current day, right? We also saw how Jax met Lewis. After losing Damon's case and visiting him, she was so lost in emotion that she crashed into the back of Lewis's car. He rushed over to see if she was okay, and it was love at first sight kind of thing. We think. Maybe for him, not her, because she was zoning out about Damon, right? And the feelings she had developed for him. Yeah, what else was going on in this episode? Y'all, I have to admit, like, I didn't care for this episode at all. Some of it appears to be relevant to Jax's story current day, but I just felt this entire episode, it just didn't flow well for me. We also learned that Autumn is gay. I have no idea what that lends to the story itself, and Autumn is one of Jax's best friends. But I have no... There's nothing, I don't know what that lends to the story itself. I don't. Other than them trying to make Autumn a more complex character, I have no idea, but it doesn't lend anything to the overarching story to me. But I don't know, maybe. The episode just didn't flow well. I thought it could be done a little differently, a lot differently. I don't know. There were a few choice scenes they could have done differently or just maybe kept out altogether. I just wasn't fond of this latest episode. I'm sorry. The good thing is it was just showing 16 years in the past, right? So it didn't advance the story on Brayden's trial yet. So we still have that to look forward to. It didn't advance the story in terms of Paul and what he did to her. Like, we know something happened between Paul and Jax, but it just gave us a little bit about that. It didn't advance the story in terms of Brayden's wife, in terms of her sending those threatening emails to Kalisha. So there's still more we can get from these remaining episodes, and I look forward to them. I don't think they'll let us down. I just think this episode 5 was just a miss. And I don't know. I just didn't like it. The next episode, they should return to Brayden's trial. I'm not going to give up. There's still room for this show to meet its full potential. It started off great. Episodes 1 and 2 were great. Episodes 3 and 4 were good. This episode 5, it lost something for me. But I'm very hopeful it goes back to being great, especially as we see the trial. So I look forward to that. This show hasn't lost my interest, so I don't want you to interpret, this bad review for episode 5. I'm still interested. I just think that this episode lacks something. How about you? What did you think? All right, Reasonable Doubt is streaming on Hulu with new episodes every Tuesday. Are you watching? You have to let me know your thoughts in a comment below. And that's all I have. So be sure to come back and give me a listen. I'd love for you to like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe, all of which will help my channel grow. So thank you in advance. My name is Danielle. You're listening to Chatter Out Loud. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, I appreciate your support. And that's all I have. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.